Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, and welcome to this FIP webinar entitled Diabetes Therapeutics Treatment Optimization and Support Technology. Focus on diabetes. My name is Professor Ross McKinnon. I'm the chair of the Board of Pharmaceutical Sciences. I am from Adelaide, Australia. Where it is quite late in the evening, and I'm well aware that it's different parts of the clock for all of you, all around the world. And it is my great pleasure to host this webinar this evening for me. As I indicated, this webinar concerns diabetes therapeutics, treatment optimization and support technology. Diabetes is, of course, a chronic metabolic disorder, is one of the major sources of morbidity around the world, one of the major non-communicable diseases, and one of the major causes of mortality in terms of non-communicable diseases. We have three wonderful speakers for this session. Our first speaker will be Kalyan Venkata, followed by Antria Pavidou, and finally Anna Busquets Caso. I'll introduce each of our speakers in more detail as we move through the session. First, some announcements from FIP. First of all, this webinar is being recorded and live streamed via YouTube. The recording will be available on our website, events.fip.org. You certainly may ask questions through the webinar using the question box provided, and our speakers will be speaking for approximately 15 to 20 minutes each, and then we will have a Q&A session, so there will be ample time to address your questions. So please utilize that Q&A box and ask the questions that you need to ask. You are certainly welcome, as always, to provide feedback to FIP through webinars@fip.org. And of course, as always, we encourage you to become a member of FIP at www.fip.org/membership. A little line at the bottom, I'm not sure what that's called, registration. We would encourage you all to become individual members of FIP and to benefit from all of the membership benefits that you receive as an individual member of FIP. This particular webinar addresses the one of the FIP development goals. Now, I'm sure that most of you are aware by now of the FIP development goals. There are a significant number of these. And our webinar, our digital events program, is tailored around these development goals. This particular webinar, of course, the topic of diabetes addresses many of our development goals, but this particular webinar is around people-centered care, which is FIP development goal 15. There are 5 webinars in this diabetes series. This is the third of those. The previous 2 on the 8th of October and 22nd of October are available for viewing at the FIP website, where all of our digital events are available. The first 2, the role of pharmacists in the prevention of diabetes. The second one, pharmacists' role in the disease state management of diabetes and prevention of complications. This particular webinar focuses on therapeutics, treatment optimization and support technology. We'll have talks in each of those areas. But I would also alert you to the fact there are 2 more webinars in this diabetes series on the 5th of November and the 12th of November, one around competencies and workforce development, and one around transforming pharmacy practice to improve care and the management of diabetes. All in all, this is a program of webinars that really seeks to address this absolutely critical disease of diabetes. As I said, one of the world's major non-communicable diseases and one of the major sources of global morbidity. For each of our webinars, we highlight learning objectives, and the learning objectives for this evening my time, it may not be this evening your time, but the learning objectives for this particular webinar are, first of all, to describe the advancement in diabetes therapeutics for managing diabetes, and much of that will focus from the first talk. Secondly, to explain the role of technology in improving health outcome for individuals living with diabetes. And thirdly, identify the different services that can be employed in the optimization of diabetes treatment. Just a word about the program, an introduction by me, which you're receiving now. As I said, we have 3 presentations. The first one around diabetes therapeutics. The second one, which is focused on the technology involved in the management of people living with diabetes. And the third one, which is more about the optimization of services by pharmacists to improve diabetes management. Followed by, as I said, a Q&A and discussion that will be driven by you, the observers of this webinar. And finally, a brief wrap up and conclusion by myself. So I'll introduce the first of our speakers. As I said, this first presentation will focus very much around diabetes therapeutics. Our first speaker is Professor Kalyan Venkata, who hails from the USA. Kalyan received his PhD in medicinal chemistry from the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, California. His PhD was focused on heterocyclic chemistry. He then received a, he also received a master's in heterocyclic chemistry from Illinois State University and a Bachelor of Pharmacy degree from his home country of India. He is currently an assistant professor of medicinal chemistry in the Department of Pharmaceutical and Administrative Sciences at the University of Health Sciences and Pharmacy at St. Louis. Prior to his time at that university, he worked as an assistant professor at Larkin University in Miami, Florida. The objective of his research program in St. Louis is to integrate advanced computational methods with synthetic organic chemistry towards the design and development of novel agents to treat drug-resistant bacterial infections, anti-cancer agents, and insulin resistance disorders such as diabetes, obesity, and polycystic ovarian syndrome, and also the development of new synthetic methods aimed at the synthesis of novel heterocyclic compounds. He is the recipient of a new investigator award from the American Association of Colleges of Pharmacy. And tonight for me, again, I apologize, it may be a different time of the day for you, but his presentation in this particular session is entitled Diabetes Therapeutics, Commonly Used Treatment Options and New Developments. Thank you, Kalyan.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Dr. McKinnon, for your kind introduction. In this topic today, I'm going to discuss about the diabetic therapeutics, like the commonly used options. And I may stress a little more on the US kind of marketing that the brands that the United States uses and that we use for the students in our school here. And also I'm going to talk about the new developments that have happened in the last decade or so, like about 10 to 15 years, what research has taken place and what are the new drugs that are there in the market right now. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm not going to introduce a lot about the diabetes because I'm going to stress more on the medicinal chemistry aspect as well as the structural design aspect of these molecules. So I just want to introduce saying that, as probably many of you know, that diabetes is a complex chronic disease characterized by uncontrolled glucose homeostasis, such as hypoglycemia. Now, it also involves, like when you talk about diabetes, we also just not talk about the homeostasis of glucose, we also talk about other issues associated with this, such as microvascular and macrovascular complications, such as blindness. You talk about diabetic neuropathy or nephropathy or a lot of other things that come into picture. But the problem right now with the diabetes is it's only targeted at controlling the hyperglycemia. So there is really no therapy to go back to fix to the original problem. Like, can we become a normal individual? Probably that is not the case at this point currently. So it's only at controlling the hyperglycemia. Next slide, please. When I think about diabetes classification, and different parts of the world uses a different classification system. In the US, we use it as type 1, which is insulin-dependent diabetes, as well as type 2, which is non-insulin-dependent diabetes, and the third one is gestational diabetes mellitus, as well as pre-diabetes. I'm sure many parts of the world, they don't talk about pre-diabetes. But here in the US, when you look at the Center for Disease Control or other American Diabetic Association, you stress a lot on pre-diabetes, because that's where more than 1/3 of the US population is right now. I mean, about 33% of the population is pre-diabetic, and about 10.2% of the population is diabetic. So it's a really huge concern, both for the for the medical fraternity as well as the individuals who are pre-diabetic. And the best option right now with the pre-diabetic is to take care of yourself. I mean, do exercise, eat well, and be healthy, have a good routine. And if you are to the US, you probably may not understand why so many people are pre-diabetic. The reason behind it is the food that we eat here. It's pretty unhealthy. At the same time, it's pretty tasty. So it makes it difficult to let it go. Next slide, please. Now, when we talk about the treatment of diabetes, currently the treatment of type 1 diabetes requires insulin replacement therapy. So you have to go with the insulin. And for the type 2, there are several classes of hypoglycemic agents, but sometimes you may even require the use of insulin if none of those are working very well, and probably the doctor might opt that option of giving you the insulin. And the number of other hypoglycemic agents that are there are insulin secretagogues, biguanides, insulin sensitizers, alpha glucosidase inhibitors, glucagon-like peptide analogs, dipeptidyl peptidase 4 inhibitors, amylin antagonists, as well as sodium glucose cotransporter 2 inhibitors. In this lecture, I'm not going to talk about every one of them. I probably would need 2 hours to discuss all this. But in this lecture, I'm just going to stress up on the ones that are probably more have been discovered in the last 10 years or so, such as glucagon-like peptide analogs, dipeptidyl peptidase inhibitors, and SGLT2 inhibitors. That would be the focus of my lecture from here on. So I'm just going to present those classes of inhibitors with a recent discovery in the insulin. I'm going to talk about that as well. Next slide, please. So when you think about glucagon-like peptide, the first thing that comes to your mind is it's an agonist. All the time you hear about the drugs being antagonists or inhibitors, but here we are talking about an agonist because this particular peptide is in our body. It works fantastically, but can we increase the half-life of the peptide to take an advantage of that? So when we think about what is a GLP, GLP is a 30 to 31 amino acid peptide that is secreted by the L cells in the gut in response to a meal. So as soon as you eat something or your stomach is full, this peptide is released. And this peptide can exist either as a 30 amino acid chain length or a 31 amino acid chain length. So it can go from 7 to 36 to 7 to 37. So there is a cut that is happening from 1 to 7. So that is your pre-GLP, you could say. And each form is equipotent. So both of them are equally active, but the GLP-1 with a 7 to 36 amino acid chain length is the predominant one that is there in the body. Now, GLP-1, why is it such an important thing? Is it promotes the insulin secretion by the pancreatic B cells. So as soon as you have a meal, the GLP-1 is kicking it out, and then it is causing that pancreas beta cells to secrete the insulin. And the good part is it doesn't stay there for a long time, but if you have a challenge, then you have to increase the half-life of the compound. Now it has an in vivo half-life of just 1 to 2 minutes. It gets broken down. And I'm going to talk a lot about that breaking down of that GLP-1. Now, GLP-1 is metabolized by this enzyme called dipeptidyl peptidase 4. There are several kinds of this. That's why the number 4 is quite important here, which basically removes the dipeptide from the N-terminus, yielding an inactive peptide that is 2 amino acids shorter. So if you follow the slides, since I don't have the mouse control with me, if you look at the top part of the chain, the amino acids chain that is there, the GLP-1 structure, you have a histidine at number 7 and alanine at number 8 and glutamic acid at number 9. So what this dipeptidyl peptidase 4 does is it cleaves it breaks down the amino acid chain length between alanine and glutamic acid. So you basically lose 2 amino acids. That's why it's called dipeptidyl. So it's basically cutting it off at that particular distance on the N-terminus end. Now, what it does, the 34 amino acid compound that you're getting is inactive. Now, GLP-1 is also susceptible because of the presence of that alanine. So after the several iterations and research, people have realized is where is this happening? Where is that cut happening? Where is this enzyme peptidase working? they figured out that it is at that alanine at the number 8 amino acid that is where it's cutting off. So what they have done is they have made several, it's very, very easy to make this amino acid kind of a thing, right? Like a peptide. I mean, you can, if you go to any synthetic organic chemist, it's not that difficult to make a 34, 35 amino acid chain length peptides. It's pretty easy to do that. So what they have done, they have made many iterations. They have found out that if you replace the alanine with the threonine, literally the in vivo half-life goes from 1 to 2 minutes to 197 minutes. And if you replace it with glycine, you're going, the half-life is up to 159 minutes, and serine, it goes up to 174 minutes. And if you change it to alpha amino isobutyric acid, which is nothing but a alanine with extra methyl group on the amino acid, the half-life goes up to 28 minutes. So just by changing that slight thing from alanine to some other different amino acid, the enzyme is not able to recognize that, because enzyme is pretty robust, and it does the same thing every time. So it's not going to pick up that new amino acid that is there. And so it survives a little longer in the body comparatively to the native peptide, which is 1 to 2 minutes. Next slide, please. Now, so the first compound that I'm going to discuss is liraglutide. I think the liraglutide was approved in the US in about 2010, and it became a marketable product in 2011. Now, what they have done is they have made substantial changes on this, and those changes have augmented very well. I mean, so what they did is, if you look at the structure of liraglutide, there is a lysine in red with a number 26 there. They added that long chain of glutamic acid. So they added the glutamic acid, and they added the long fatty acid chain to that. So the reason for that fatty acid chain is it goes and binds to the albumin in the body. So that actually retards the renal elimination. So even if as soon as it binds to the albumin, the metabolism will slow down considerably. And they have seen that, and also replacing the arginine. So the lysine at 34 with arginine 34, the half-life went from 1 to 2 minutes to 13 hours. So you have a product now there that can be taken twice a day. So you went all the way from 1 to 2 minutes of being a natural peptide to a compound that is about 13 hours active, which is a considerable improvement over the natural peptide. Next slide, please. So the next compound that I'm going to talk about is dulaglutide, which I believe was approved in 2014, and it became marketable in 2015, and this was made by Eli Lilly. So what the changes they made here are, again, they replaced the alanine with a glycine at number 8, but they made it as a fusion protein. If you look at the cartoon I have there, you have a GLP analog with a linker and with a modified IG4 that is attached to it. All we are trying to do is, there are two things that all these companies have taken advantage of. One is to retard the renal clearance, or that means decrease the renal clearance of these peptides, so they stay a little longer in the body, and also change that amino acid at number 8 position. Sometimes they did that, sometimes they did not. Here they use a dimer kind of a thing, that like they have this compound as a fusion protein between the two identical peptides that are attached to the IG4 as a fragment, and that fragment has a low renal clearance. And now you can see it can be administered on a weekly basis. So you went all the way from 1 to 2 minutes to 13 hours. Now you are at a half-life of about 5 days. So this is a fantastic improvement, and this is a really, really good molecule. Next slide, please. Now, this compound is studied a lot in the US. The main reason is this is probably one of the first FDA-approved molecule for weight management. So this molecule is getting a lot of vibe in the US, saying that this molecule is helping people who are chronically obese. So this is probably one of the first of this kind in this class of molecules that are approved for the obesity purposes, not just diabetes. Now, this is also a fantastic molecule. This is a long-acting GLP analog. Now, if you look at it, the alanine, I put it as X. So they converted that alanine to isoamino butyric acid. So they just added one extra methyl group on the alanine to make it isoamino butyric acid. Now, even with that one extra methyl group on the carbon there, the enzyme is not able to pick it up. So the half-life goes from all the way from, let's say 1 to 2 minutes. I said about 28 minutes by changing that only one thing, but also they changed the lysine at the 26th position, and they added that ADO linker, as well as they converted the lysine at 34 to arginine. By having these 3 changes, the half-life went up to 165 hours. And now what they have seen is that these small changes also help in resisting the DPP enzyme, which is dipeptidyl peptidase enzyme, from degrading the peptide, as well as it also has a reduced renal clearance. So it was both of them work very well. And now this compound is the first compound that is also orally approved by the FDA. All the other GLP agonists that I talked about, and some of them I did not talk in this lecture because they're quite older ones. This is the only one that is that is approved as an oral medication. So this is a fantastic development because it helps the patient adherence, as well as it's easy to use. So this compound is also one of the first that is approved for weight management in the US. And this compound is generating a lot of good things because it has that potential to survive as an oral compound, and that makes a big difference. Next slide, please. So the next class of compounds that I'm going to talk about are DPP-4 inhibitors. Now, all the things that we talked about so far was that this particular enzyme is breaking the GLP. So why not just block this particular enzyme rather than going out to developing a new analog for for the glucagon-like peptide? So what the scientists have done is they went after this particular enzyme, and these are the compounds that are there in the market, at least in the US. There are about 5 inhibitors currently used. Now, what is a DPP enzyme? I should say DPP-4. It's a serine protease enzyme that exists both as a membrane as well as a plasma soluble form. So it's either bound to your enzyme or is it freely floating in the plasma. The major reason how these compounds were designed, they were designed knowing that this particular enzyme goes after alanine. So that this really did the computational modeling of these compounds to understand how the active site of this particular enzyme looks like. And they have found out that if you insert a basic amino group that is equivalent to the alanine of the GLP-1, you can basically block this enzyme. So there is basically a competitive inhibition between the alanine as well as this particular compound cell. And they have found out there are 3 pharmacophores that can work very well. One is amino isopyrrolidine, xanthine, and pyrimidine 2,4-dione, which is a uracil derivative. So if you look at this compound, all of them have one thing that is common, is NH group. Now, when you look at the complex compounds like saxagliptin, vildagliptin, and sitagliptin, you see that the first 2, they have a cyano group, which is a CN. Now, this was a very smart design, in fact, because knowing that this is a serine protease enzyme, there is a hydroxyl group on the serine amino acid. So that is pretty nucleophilic enough to attack the cyano that is electrophilic. And so now you have a drug that is binding to the active hydroxyl group of the enzyme. So they've created this kind of a covalent reversible interaction between the gliptin molecule as well as a serine protease enzyme. And the other ones, the sitagliptin, linagliptin, and also algogliptin, they have designed it so that there is a NH group right there that can attack the centers that are there in the amino acids, the active site of the enzyme, and able to bind to the active site very well. So there is a considerable research on these particular drugs, and they are pretty popular as well, just like the GLP analogs are. And this is like one step ahead of GLP because you're blocking the enzyme that is inactivating the GLP. So this is a very a smarter move in terms of having both in the arsenal to treat diabetes. Next slide, please. So the next molecule the series of compounds that I'm going to talk about are sodium glucose cotransporter inhibitors, or SGLT inhibitors at all. So now it's very well known that inhibiting this particular channel lowers the renal threshold for glucose. So all we are talking about is to block the reabsorption of glucose back into the bloodstream. So that is what it does, and thereby you are basically increasing the urinary glucose excretion. So whatever that is a glucose that is there in the urine, these inhibitors have this particular channel has a potential to reabsorb. So by blocking this, what we are doing is we are not letting that glucose be reabsorbed. So thereby we are increasing the urinary glucose excretion. Now, the pharmacophore of this compound was isolated from the bark of the apple tree. It's commonly said that don't bark at the wrong tree. Looks like they barked at the companies have barked at the right tree. And they have been able to find out that this compound called fluorescein, which is basically a beta-D glucoside, which is nothing but a glycosidic molecule where you have a sugar moiety that is attached to a glycon part using a glycosidic bond that is there, the oxygen bond. Now, what the problem with that oxygen bond is, they're metabolically unstable. So if you take that compound as it is, the fluorescein, it's pretty unstable because the enzymes of beta D glucosidases enzyme that are present in our GI can easily break that bond and the compound will become inactive. So what scientists have done is, why don't we replace that O glucosidic bond with a C glucosidic bond that has gliflozin? So now that slight change, and of course, there are certain other changes that they made on the heterocyclic ring systems, like they introduced the thiophene and all those to make them more drug-like. Now we have 4 different molecules that are there that are C glucosidic rather than being a O glucosidic, and they all work very well. So that is the story about SGLT inhibitors. And these are also not very old. They're also pretty comparatively new compared to the old therapies that we have. Next slide, please. So the last thing that I'm going to discuss is about ultra long acting insulin. Now, there is a lot of research on insulin because it's probably one of the molecules that, or I should say, the peptides that is pretty easy to use, and people have gotten used to it. That is a major thing about it. Insulin D-glucosidase is an ultra long acting that can be administered about daily or 3 times a week, depending upon the situation. What they have done is they have made certain changes in your regular. So on the left side, I'm showing you a regular insulin structure, which is a normal insulin structure with an A and B chain. And the other side, you are seeing the D-glucosidase molecule, which is in the colored. What are the changes that they made is they made that slight changes by putting at the B30 position, they added a threonine. They replaced that beta threonine with the N-acylation of beta lysine. So they replaced that particular amino acid. They added a lysine and they removed the complete B30 threonine, and they added this long chain diacidic compound called hexadecane dioic acid. So all we are doing is we are increasing that little bit. So what happens is it forms an hexamer, multi-hexamer complexes, and those hexamers upon the administration will become a depot, and they slowly release because they are bind to the albumin in the protein, the albumin protein in the plasma. And so that slow release causes this compound to stay a little longer in the body. So that's what leads to the ultra long acting. So everything at the end of the day, the way these all compounds have been taken advantage is understanding the situation of the molecule, like where are the parts that you can take advantage of. This requires immense research. At the same time, you have to sometimes be lucky. So by choosing the right molecule, you are able to get that kind of a compound that is pretty stable, and also helps the therapy part as well, because you're going from everyday use to sometimes compounds that are used like a weekly. So this is a major jump in the diabetic research that has taken place in the last 10 to 15 years. Next slide, please. So the next one that I'm going to talk about is a tandem diabetes care technology. So this FDA has approved in 2019. It's a pretty new thing that is going on. Previously, we had the meters that could check your glucose levels. But here we are using the integrated therapy where you not only check it, also you can deliver the insulin at the same time. So that's a big development, because you can control at every stage in your life from now on. Is you get a reading on your meter. Okay, now you ate it. In the next 30 minutes, what your glucose would be, the meter will check it for itself, and it will pump the required insulin that is required. So that is an amazing development, because you don't have to worry to go to you are never going to go to be a hypoglycemic. So it will have that ability to pump the required amount. You are not going to get more or less. You're going to get the right amount that your body, the meter is going to sense out. So obviously there are certain challenges. It's end of the day, it's a technology, so it can fail, but it is a major development in the area where this is the first time they're having this technology. So next slide, please. Looks like really thank you for your attendance today, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have either now or end of the lecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Venkata. We will hold over questions to following the third speaker. So we'll listen to all of our speakers first and get a sort of full appreciation, if you like, for the trends in treatment and also the other technologies associated with managing diabetes patients. Thank you for a very detailed and elegant discussion of the various therapies that have emerged over recent times, and also some of the trends that we're seeing with existing therapies. So thank you very much, Kalyan. We'll move to our second speaker. Our second speaker is, as you can see from this slide, Antria Pavidou, and she hails from Cyprus. Antria is a PhD student at the University of College London, and also concurrently working in her home country of Cyprus at the Pharmaceutical Services Division of the Ministry of Health. She obtained her pharmacy degree from Patras University and then gained a master's degree in clinical pharmacy at University College London. She is a passionate and ambitious clinical pharmacist with aspiration to advance pharmacists' role and consolidate their role as healthcare professionals and service providers in her home country of Cyprus. She's currently undertaking a PhD degree with the conscious decision for her eagerness to learn more about non-communicable disease, develop research skills, and upgrade her career. Her thesis relates to mHealth interventions led by pharmacists seeking to optimize self-management of type 2 diabetes patients. She's a member of the Scientific Council of the State Health Services Organisation, which advises on all scientific matters concerning the organisation in consultation and coordination with the scientific committees of hospitals. Welcome, Antria. We look forward to your presentation, which is entitled Deploying Technology to Improve the Management of People Living with Diabetes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next slide, so I can start. And the next one. Hello, everyone. I'm Antria, and together we are going to explore how technology can improve the management of diabetes. We are going through the need for technology, why technology, what is technology, how technology can be used to improve the management of diabetes, the importance of technology in supporting diabetes patients, number of challenges, and a few words about my PhD research using technology to improve the management of diabetes, and summary. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the need for technology. Due to the population growth and the rising incidence of diabetes, 1 death every 8 seconds due to diabetes, and the unmet needs for more personalized care demand a new approach for the delivery of healthcare services worldwide, which will enhance access, quality, efficiency, and cost effectiveness. Technology might be that key because it consists a great potential in helping addressing contemporary global health problems, including diabetes. Next slide. As you already know, good management of diabetes comprises several components, such as medicine, promotion of healthy lifestyle, patient education to facilitate self-care, regular screening for early detection, and treatment of complications through a multidisciplinary team. Hence, deploying technology is a major new opportunity to achieve this goal and offer integrated care. Next one. Why technology? Due to its ease of use, broad reach of wide acceptance, more people have access to mobile phone than clean water or toothbrush. Click, please. And in 2018, around 2.2 billion mobile phone subscriptions were noted. This is 7.5 billion people. Particularly, 95% of the world had mobile phone network subscription, 98% of population had a mobile cellular subscription, and 61% were recorded as internet users. Technology have changed the lifestyle of individuals. It revolutionized how people communicate with each other and seek and exchange information. Click, please. Advance in mobile phone and wearable devices means we can record and use our own data for health and behavior change. Next slide. But what is technology? What do we mean by technology? Technology can be only using the simple SMS or making phone calls, emails, multimedia, including audio, video, images, or even Bluetooth, patient monitoring device, personal digital assistant. It comprises computers, internet, simple phones or smartphones, simple application or complex one. Next slide. Many definitions were identified through literature, which concern the use of technology for the provision of healthcare, including, click, as you may already heard before, e-health, telemedicine, telehealth, mobile health, etc. A study in 2007 found 104 peer review about the definition of the word telemedicine. Currently, there is a lack of generally accepted and standardized definition and loose terminology through the literature. The latest formal report found through literature aiming the classification of technology was published in 2018 and used the term digital health intervention, which I'm going to use also through my slides. Digital health interventions are organized based on the target primary user, click, which are intervention for clients, intervention for healthcare providers, intervention for health system, resource managers, intervention for data services. Next slide, please. But how can we use technology to improve the management of diabetes? Under the umbrella of digital health intervention, a broad spectrum of action can be established, from logistic management information system to telemedicine system, decision support system, health management information system, electronic medical records, identification registries and directories, client communication system, health monitoring and surveillance, access to information and education for healthcare professionals. And next slide, thank you. It also enables communication or consultation between individuals and health services, health call centers, emergency toll-free telephone services, intersectoral communication in emergencies, or the opposite between health services and individuals. For example, treatment adherence, a reminder to attend appointment or medication refill, communication mobilization, health promotion campaigns, also between healthcare professionals or between practitioners and patients, such as mobile telehealth, and between individual healthcare professionals and family caregiver, particularly for hard to reach population. Click, please. It can be established one way, for example, patient sending information to a healthcare professional, click, or two ways. It can be established, click, please, in synchronous, which means in real time, or asynchronous. Next slide, please. Technology can be used for the prevention, for the enforcement, and for the management of diabetes. For the prevention, it can be used to provide awareness, training, and education for healthcare professionals and patients, socially networking, for enforcement to provide surveillance, monitoring, ongoing assessment of patient status, and for management to provide education about wellness, physical activity, or even smoking cessation. Click, please. Through technology, it can be achieved behavior change communication, provide educational leaflets, education, reminders, graphical reports, sending data, advice, dose adjustment, or even adherence to medication, to self-test blood glucose, to self-test blood pressure where relevant, adherence to exercise and diet, monitoring, data collection, tracking and uploading data, record keeping, alerts, feedback, health worker training, or referral to other healthcare professionals. I can literally go on and on and on with this slide. Next, thank you. So one example of digital health intervention, which you can find commonly in the literature, and in my view, it can be utilized even using a small SMS, or if you are able and have a device, an expensive or a complex one. It follows these steps. Initially, a reminder is sent to a patient for self-monitoring, or if you have the device, it can automatically send the data and the reminders. Hence, it creates a monitoring data. Then the data are fed to a personal health record, automatically if you have the device, or manually, in this case, a pharmacist can fed into a personal health record. And alerts are sent to a specialized staff when values are above health score. Synchronous if you again have a device, or asynchronous if a pharmacist, for example, can read the data 1 or 2 days after, which means that this is not an emergency device, I'm an emergency service, sorry, but it can do the job for you and provide this service, and then send feedback to the patient with regular advice on ways to manage diabetes through nutrition, exercise, pharmacotherapy, through simple SMS, emails, or if you have the device, and then follow up. Next slide, please. Digital health has undoubtedly become one of the most important strategies in ameliorating the delivery of healthcare, showing promising results in improving health outcomes by improving quality and coverage of care, promoting positive changes in health behavior, enabling a more patient-centered care models, empowering patients in their own self-care, increase patient, family, and community engagement, increase and improve self-care and home care, increase and improve embrace the barrier of the normal care setting in patient monitoring, and raising awareness on key public health issues. Particularly, mobile diabetes support generated a statistically significant improvement in areas such as patient glycemic control in short-term and long-term over 6 months, and medication adherence. Also, numerous studies show that mobile interventions are acceptable to users. Next slide, please. However, there are a number of challenges with digital health intervention. The quality of the evidence base remains limited. Although the level of e-health and particularly m-health activity is growing in countries, standardized approach for applying digital health in health system and its services are still being researched. Through the literature, there are a lot of scaled or pilotitis, as we call it, scattered pilots, closed technology or expensive technology. And there is a lack of interpretation of system, evaluation, review, and very few analysis about cost. The WHO and the International Telecommunication Union recognize the potential of mHealth and the need for further development, and has proposed the creation of a joint mHealth hub for EU and the EU mHealth hub project Horizon 2020. Next slide, please. Thank you. So about a few words about my research and background information. As you already know, diabetes is a chronic disease affecting people globally and characterized as epidemic and pandemic. Cyprus, my home country, has one of the highest prevalence of diabetes among other European countries. And achieving optimal management of diabetes can largely prevent or delay the progression of diabetes and appearance of other comorbidities, provide long and healthy life to patients. Pharmacists can provide high quality information to motivate patients to understand and appreciate the importance of medication. Mobile health interventions have become one of the most important services in ameliorating delivery of healthcare, and thus constitutes an area for further research. Next slide. Hence, my aim was initially to design and implement an mHealth pharmacist-led intervention to improve diabetes self-management through improving patient knowledge, adherence, and empowerment, and then evaluate its feasibility and potential impact. Next slide. The methods that I use was divided in 2 steps. The first step was to develop a complex intervention to identify the evidence base by reviewing published and existing systematic review, identify appropriate theory, modeling process and outcome. Then assess its feasibility and pilot methods and evaluation. The feasibility was regarding intervention workability, acceptability from the perspective of main stakeholders, healthcare professionals and patients, and also service cost. For the evaluation, I evaluated medication adherence, diabetes self-care activity prior and after the intervention. Next click. Thank you. My intervention was divided in 2 phases. Phase 1 was the consultation session, where I had to explain the health intervention to patients, particularly in Cyprus, where there's a lack of health intervention. Hence, I had to explain to the patient what I'm going to do. And I also used the diabetes self-care activity questionnaire, which I found in Greek version, and applied principle of motivation interview to aid the patient in setting personal goals and develop a personal plan tailored to their needs. The second phase is basically the intervention services, which comprise online communication with the pharmacist, tracking and uploading of blood sugar readings, graphical reports, reminders, education, and optimization of pharmacotherapy. The vehicle that I use is Viber application, which is similar like WhatsApp, phone call, and SMS, simple SMS. During the follow-up, I had to review the patient, provide feedback, and revise and adjust the intervention and diabetes plan. The duration was up to 3 telephone sessions with 6 to 8 weeks interval. Next slide, please. The preliminary findings indicate that the patients were willing to take part in a novel pharmacy-led intervention for diabetes using mobile phone technology. I also identified priorities of patients regarding 5 domains of self-care activities, which are medication adherence, blood sugar testing, healthy eating, and physical activity and food care. Also, it showed potential input from pharmacists in supporting diabetes patients. Next slide. To summarize, there's clearly a need to change the way we see diabetes. The rising incidence of diabetes and the unmet needs for more personalized care demand a new approach for the delivery of healthcare services worldwide. Technology, due to its ease of use, broad reach, and wide acceptance, might be the key. Technology could be from simple SMS to patient monitoring device or expensive technology. Currently, through the literature, there is a loose terminology about digital health intervention, and the latest formal report used the term, the digital health intervention. Technology and diabetes. It was shown that technology ameliorates the delivery of healthcare, showing promises result in improving health outcomes. And regarding diabetes, it shows that it can improve patient glycemic control and medication adherence, and hence can be a catalyst and consistent promises area for further research. Regarding the future, further rigorous studies are necessary in order to identify the optimal type of intervention and the way of it should be delivered. Thank you very much. That's all for me.
Thank you very much to our second speaker, Antria, certainly highlighting the significant impact of digital interventions in terms of improving the care of diabetes patients in Cyprus. We'll move to our third speaker. Our third speaker is Ana Busquets Caso. Ana is from Spain. She owns and manages a community pharmacy and has owned that pharmacy since 2005. She is Vice President of the Catalonia branch of the Spanish Society of Community and Family Pharmacy, SEFAC, and also a member of the Diabetes Special Interest Group of SEFAC. She is also a member of the Expert Advisory Group of the FIP Practice Transformation Program on Diabetes. Anna's presentation is entitled A Global Overview of Treatment Optimization Services by Pharmacists to Improve Diabetes Management, a focus clearly on services. So thank you, Anna.
Good afternoon, and thank you for your presentation. It's my pleasure to be here as a spokesperson of the diabetes group of the Spanish Society of Clinical, Family and Community Pharmacy. From now on, during this presentation, I will be mentioning a SEFAC. Next slide, please. Before the beginning of my presentation, talking about treatment optimization services, I would like to introduce a global interaction between GP, patient, and pharmacies. As you can see in the slide, there are 3 types of pharmacies in Spain, but I would like to focus that I would like to mention that in Spain, pharmacies don't have access, community pharmacies don't have access to the medical history of the patients. This is a real problem that we have because reviewing medications without this information is quite hard and sometimes impossible. So we hope that at some point we will succeed and we will be able to have access to medical history of our patients. Apart from that, we are working on improving both the relationships and communication between GPs and pharmacists. This will result in a better control of patients because they will receive the same message from all of us. Next slide, please. So let's begin with the overview of the treatment optimization services. I will be reviewing all of them except minor element service. Next slide, please. First of all, I will be explaining the new medicine service. Here, when the GP prescribes a new medication and the patient comes to the pharmacy, as we have electronic prescription, when we check that prescription, it appears a pop-up that advises us, that gives an advice to us that the patient has a new medication. Then we are able to give the appropriate information about this medication. In Catalonia, we are doing an extra thing in this program, which is officially registering it. With those registers, we hope that at some point the government will be paying us for this new medicine service. Next slide. Here you can see some of the information that we are giving while doing the service. We ask the patients which are the things that they hadn't understood properly when they were at GP. So then we can focus our explanation on those items, which it could be the dose, for how long, the frequency, the route, wherever. Next slide, please. Changing of service. When we detect any problem or necessity that our patients might have, then we will refer them to the pharmaceutical monitoring service, where we will be dealing with the appropriateness, effectiveness, and safety of our patients' medication. I would like to tell you that although I will not be talking about diet and exercise, it is so important to recommend those to patients with diabetes. Next slide, please. Appropriateness. When we detect that patients with diabetes have stopped the medication treatment or don't have any treatment at all, we will refer them to GP. And we will do the same when detecting a therapeutic duplication. Normally, it happens when a patient is going from the hospital to the primary care service or vice versa. Next slide, please. Talking about effectiveness, there's lots of things that pharmacists could do. Most pharmacies in Spain could do glucose tests or A1Cs. So it's a good way to check if patients are well controlled with their medication or not. If we detect high levels at any point, then we will refer them to GP. By the way, we have to put our efforts trying that patients have a good adherence, which not only means that they are being compliant with their medication, but also that they are following a healthy diet and doing some exercise. If we detect any non-compliance problem, then we can refer patients to a personalized dosage system or to a medication use review, which I will be explaining later in my presentation. Finally, interactions. If we detect any of them, then of course we are referring patients to GP. Here I present you one of the useful tools that the diabetes group of SEFAC has developed to allow us to manage the monitoring of the patients in a better way. This diagram allows us to have a diabetes medication in one page divided by the mechanism of action. Next one, please. The last part of the pharmaceutical monitoring service is checking the safety. The most important thing here is that when we discover any side effect, we notify them to the yellow card system. And of course, we refer patients to GP. What's more, there are some parts of Spain which are doing a pilot program because they are notifying the side effects of new drugs. Next one. The yellow card system in Spain is the same one for all of the healthcare professionals, GPs, nurses, pharmacists. So we have this website, as you can see in the slide, where all of us notify. Next one. Changing of topic. I will focus now on the medication use review service that I mentioned before. SEFAC has developed their own MUIR program called Revisa. Pharmacists must do a course to be allowed to do the service in their pharmacies. In this service, we will be checking if patients know everything about the medications that the GP has prescribed them, and explaining to patients how they have to manage their insulins or how they have to dosage their medication, where to store the medication, and so on. At the end of this service, we can be referring patients to another service if they need, like the one of nutrition service or a personalized dosage system that I mentioned before too, stop smoking, whatever. Next one, please. The last service that I will be explaining you is about improving medication adherence. SEFAC has recently developed this new service. As in Revisa, we have a specific course that trains us which questions we have to ask patients while dispensing. Next one. In this slide, it's quite small, but I think that you can already be reading it. We will be asking different questions, it depending if the patient is collecting the drugs or not. And the drugs that they will be not collecting, after doing those questions, we will be able to know which type of non-other adherence they have. So then we can act consequently and refer patients, go back please. Thank you. To another service as we are, depending on the type of the non-adherence that we detected. Next one. Next one. All these things, all these services that I've been explaining you are very important to be done with our diabetes patients, but it's also really important that we are registering all of them. That's why SEFAC has done this online platform to register all services that you can see in the slide. Sorry, there's a mistake. It says COPD service instead of COVID one. But I'm sure that you will realize it. So we can, as I was saying, we can register all the things that we are doing in the service. We don't have diabetes service still being registered, but we hope that we will soon have it. And patient has their own app, so they can check all the things that we are registering. Apart from that, I would like to mention that unfortunately, in Spanish government is not paying us for the services that we are doing. So patients have to pay themselves. This is a problem because we can't reach all of patients because not all of them can afford to pay the services. So we hope that at some point this will be solved. Next one. To final my presentation, I would like to show you that SEFAC has been putting effort into improving the relationships with medical scientific societies. As you can see in the slide, we participate in many scientific papers with other medical societies, and we began this relationship in 2010. So it's been a long time that we are trying to improve those relationships. Next one. We've done some practical guides, some courses together, some documents together. Next one. Click, click. Thank you. So we've participated in medical congresses together too. And at the final slide, you can see that we are proud to explain that we've been able to do 3 congresses with Semergen, which is a medical society, and we hope that this will continue from now on because we are enriching and learning a lot by doing them together. Thank you for attending, and if you have any questions, just ask me.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Muchas gracias.
De nada.
That's about as good as my Spanish gets, I'm afraid. I'll ask all of our three speakers now if they could show us their faces. There they are. Antria, there she is. Thank you for three excellent presentations and quite diverse and different presentations about three very sort of different areas of management of diabetes, if you like. One very much focused on drug therapy, one very much focused around some of the digital interventions, and one very much focused on health services. We don't have a lot of questions in the Q&A, and I'll encourage people to type any questions they have in there, but I certainly have one for you, Kalyan, which relates to to pre-diabetes and whether pre-diabetics have specific characteristics that are different from other types of diabetes. I'm not quite sure what that means. Do you think it's possible to provide interventions on genes before people develop diabetes? So really it's a question, I think, around gene therapy options. Did you just want to make a comment about gene therapy options for diabetes? I think they're talking in relation to type 2. Obviously, gene therapy is something that is being considered for type 1. But did you want to make any comments around gene therapy in general?
No, I'm not going to make a much comment on the gene therapy, but I would make a comment on the pre-diabetes is that there is no specific characters that you could look for in a patient, whether he's a pre-diabetic or not. So, I mean, in the US, what you measure is when you go to your primary care physician, they would want to have your fasting glucose less than 100. So if you are in the range between 100 and 126, you are pre-diabetic, as well as your HbA1c, which is between 5.7 to 6.4. So it's a range where more than 30% or 35% of the adults will fall upon. So the best thing that the intervention that you can do is to exercise. I don't know whether I could say it or not. I myself consider a pre-diabetic as per my doctor. And the only prescription he gives me is there is no gene therapy or nothing required. All you would do is go eat less, eat many times a day, don't sleep as soon as you eat, and exercise. So these are the common things that you were talked upon, and those are the ones that can put you back to your regular. I mean, you may become a normal and not be a pre-diabetic if you can do whatever I just mentioned, and not to eat too many carbs. I'm not sure whether many people understand the food situation in the US. It's pretty highly concentrated fructose corn syrup that is used in the preparations. So it's very, very sweet. And that tends to, you put in a lot of carbs because of that. And that has been an issue. And there is really no therapy apart from doing the exercise. I mean, that's the only prescription that a doctor will always tell you to do. I mean, I'm sure if a patient, you cannot fix them from the pre-diabetes, they will become a diabetic, and then you are again back on the therapy. And there are a lot of interventions that are taking place in the gene therapy arena. I think there are even the company that Moderna is working a lot on RNA therapeutics. And also, like, there's a lot of research going on whether you can give oxygen back to the pancreatic cells, so they can again stimulate and give you the insulin. So there is a considerable research, but I'm not really aware of a therapy that a pre-diabetic could know it at this point so that they can become a normal again. I don't think so.
So the critical question there, Kalyan, is, are you adhering to your exercise program that your doctor has prescribed for you?
I am.
Are you playing more cricket?
I mean, as long as we can beat Australia, I'm fine with that.
I was going to say, given the way your team is playing in the World Cup, you could get a game if you practice a little more. So, sorry, that's an in-joke between cricket playing countries. There is a World Cup on at the moment, and India are not doing very well. Can I ask you, Anna, a question that you highlighted the fact that the Spanish government wasn't paying for the services that you had outlined currently. And I just wonder what the mechanism is for payment there. I mean, what has to happen for them to pay, and how do you sort of get them to pay?
There's no mechanism established yet, so we hope that at some point they will establish some of them, but we are just at the very beginning. We are just with SEFAC, we are doing many things to prove that our services work and that patients will be better if we are doing those services, but still nothing has been really being done.
So the government doesn't have a sort of a mechanism, as in like a cost benefit analysis or anything by which they judge whether they should pay for those services?
Not yet. Not yet, but at least in Catalonia, I know that with this new program service that we've been doing, the government is knowing, it's in her knowledge that we are doing this. So we hope that at some point this will make a difference. But we are still like only now showing that we can do this, but not they are not still like analyzing in a proper way. We had with the personalized dosage system in Catalonia too, we had something that we were being paid for doing this. It was a pilot program, and it was done to prove that doing this dosage personalized system helped the patients, but we didn't hear any notice when we end the pilot program, and it was the end of everything.
Okay, I have another question for you from the Q&A function, Kalyan, which is around the adverse effects or adverse events associated with DPP-4 inhibitors. Could you provide a bit more clarity around that?
Sure. It's like any other oral hypoglycemic agents. You tend to, if you take that agent, there is a chance of getting hypoglycemia. At the same time, there are a lot of meta-analysis that has taken place. A lot of publications have been have occurred in that area, that it is known that these compounds can increase the risk for heart failure. And if you are a doctor, you got to be very aware of the situation that when you're giving a patient, that there is a chance of having heart failure. So if you see that, then you probably should not be going with this agent. So the common adverse effects are, again, headache, nausea, and those are the common adverse effects. But the bigger one, the big picture you have to look at is a heart failure. And these compounds are known to cause that. They at least increase the risk for heart failure.
Okay, Antria, you made a comment about Cyprus having a high incidence of diabetes. I was just curious as to what the reasons for that were.
Yeah, interesting question. So although in Cyprus, our diet, it used to be the good and the way of life that you should follow due to the Mediterranean diet, a lot of people are not really eating well, and due to the lack of exercise, I believe this is the main reason that the diabetes is increasing the last year. So we need to do more on that and to prevent that. And most of people probably are not aware about having diabetes. So there are a lot of areas to fix.
Could I also ask, you put up a slide that showed almost a bewildering array of digital interventions, that sort of areas that digital interventions could impact on, if you like. I wondered if there was, in your country, if there was a systematic approach to digital health interventions. Is there a sort of a national strategy or something that actually sort of drives the implementation of digital strategies?
No, unfortunately, about diabetes, there is currently nothing. The only thing that I found was another PhD student doing an application for diabetes also, which he was a dietitian, so it was in another area. The only good thing in Cyprus about technology is that the national health system, it provides a good IT system to where you can find, have access to the patient history and everything. And hence I believe maybe in the future, maybe if they are willing to provide some money on that, it will be easy to add an intervention about diabetes by using technology. But currently there is nothing about diabetes and technology, nor any other disease. They currently try to improve technology through the national health system. So there are a small few steps. So probably maybe in the future we can use that for a lot of disease, including diabetes.
Okay, I have another question from the chat. The Q&A box for you, Anna, which relates to the interaction between pharmacists and GPs in order to optimize adherence and how you go about, so I guess, maximizing the effectiveness of that relationship.
Yes. Okay, I forgot to explain before that when we are referring to GP, that I mentioned a lot of times in my presentation, we have in SEFAC expert, we have an application form that we fill everything that we've done with the patient, and we refer the patient with this application form. So then the doctor will know exactly what we've done, and he would have more information of the current problem with the patient.
Okay, Kalyan, I have another one for you, which relates to the use of SGLT2 inhibitors in congestive cardiac failure and patients with diabetic nephropathy. Could you provide any more information around their use in these particular conditions?
Unfortunately not. I'm not a practicing pharmacist. I'm more a researcher. So anything I tell you probably would be more from the research point of view rather than a practice point of view. So I would probably hold on myself not to answer those kind of questions because I'm purely a researcher. So it would be not ideal for me to answer that question, whether it should be given to a nephropathic patient or not. That's not what I am aware of.
Okay, there was a question in chat, but I believe it's been answered by one of our attendees in relation to sampling. I think that's been done. Okay, I think I have one more for you. This is a really tough one, Kalyan, and Kalyan, I'm not sure whether you can answer this one or not. The question relates to diabetic patients and organ transplants and the therapy you would use to treat those patients given the issues associated with the use of steroids. I think that's a pretty tough question, but I didn't know whether you wanted to have a go at that one.
Again, the same question. So it's known that when you're at steroids, they're used for immunosuppression after organ transplant. But again, the problem is in the US, you always go for individualized therapy when you're doing an organ transplant. You sit with the doctor and the doctor will probably choose a particular kind of medication that you should go on. And there is no real general answer to that, but people generally go after cyclosporins and other kind of immunosuppression agents, but they also tend to all cause diabetes at some point of time. So they would probably again kick in the diabetics. So again, the answer is there is no real answer to that particular question. It's again depends upon the particular patient and the doctor, what is ideal for them. And I don't think there is a common answer. There is not a single drug that you can give to a patient of organ transplant But there is a particular system called steroid-free therapy right now in the US for immunosuppression. So there are a number of series of drugs that a doctor might try upon, and they may probably click with one of those based on how well the patient is responding to that. I'm not sure if I answered the question, but I'm being diplomatic enough to say that there is really no particular therapy that can be given in this stage. Single therapy.
I think you did very well. Okay, I think that's, sorry, there is another question in the Q&A box. I'll just check that one. Dr. Kalyan again, could you provide a comment around the status of research and development in relation to oral insulin?
Okay, again, I don't think there is a really much success in that area right now, even though there is a lot of trial and error that is going on. The reason behind is the stability of the compounds with respect to the therapy. I'm sure a lot of companies are investing in that. There are companies that are investing using a nasal route, and I know a friend of mine who does a research on this. They are trying in their own lab, in the University of Utah. There is still a lot of research going on this, but we don't think that we are yet there in terms of being a marketable product. But you should probably see something soon. I mean, if we can put a lot of emphasis such as money into this field, but right now you have so many good therapies out there. So there are good avenues for treating diabetes. So oral would be a great thing that can happen, because that will help a lot of adherence, like other two speakers are talking about. By having an oral insulin, that would be a really big step forward for treating diabetes. But right now I don't think there is a much fuzz in the field about that, even though we may talk a little bit about.
Okay, so I think we have answered all the questions in the Q&A box. So let me ask a very general question of all of you, and you've touched on this, Kalyan, already. There's a lot of drugs out there for diabetes now. We're not short of drug options. We have many classes of drugs, and we have some quite effective drugs, as we know. There are limitations on many of the drugs in terms of the fact they can't be used as single agents and so forth. But if I was to ask you, each of you independently, and I'm going to go to you first, Anna, where do you see the major improvements in the management of diabetes coming from in the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Okay, I guess.
And Antria and Kalyan, you can think about it while Anna's telling us the answer. So.
I guess that it will be with GLP-1s, the drugs, because we are just at the beginning of the use of them. And I guess that with the prior trials that we've done, they're doing a great job with patients. So I guess that this will be the most important.
Okay, I'm going to go to Antria next.
So I agree, medication are popping every year, especially for diabetes. Each year a new medication comes up, etc., or similar ones. But I believe, from my perspective, technology, of course, or the way as a pharmacist see the diabetes patients can play a major role. So if we explore that area, or if we see that as pharmacists can provide a lot of information to the diabetes patients, I believe we can make a huge impact on them, despite creating new drugs or expecting for the oral insulin, etc. So there are a lot of areas, I believe, apart from medicines, it's a major area to see how to use the medicines or how to provide the information to the patient. That's for me.
Kalyan.
I would say the research, I mean, the way we are going right now, probably in the next 5 to 10 years, we should be able to have a better technology. I mean, I bet a lot on the slide that I presented on using the technology where you can have, I mean, you can monitor as well as, you can give the patient the required dose of insulin. So there may be a point where we may even go with the oral hypoglycemic compounds in such a scenario where you can probably dissolve that in a solution and have it and give it to the patient if it's required. But right now we are at a stage where for the GLP agonists, we went from once a day to once a week. There may be a point in the future where maybe we may take once a month. Maybe we may create a depot in the body as a reservoir that can work for about a month or so. So we are. I mean, there is a great advancement in this kind of research right now, and now we are also realizing that peptides at one point of time were thought to be a bad for oral, but now there is a new research showing that you can actually develop peptides that can survive the stomach, right? So there is a phenomenal improvement. And as someone asked me just a question whether oral insulin will ever happen, it might happen as soon as we understand the chemistry behind the insulin better. We have done a great deal of research on that, and we understand it very well. But now we are using the chemical technology, like using the synthetic organic chemistry in such a way that can we utilize those to improve upon the already existing therapies. So like especially this insulin or something like that. I'm pretty optimistic about this particular area where we are. There is a phenomenal improvement. Like I have seen recently that people are getting artificial kidneys, or people getting kidneys from the pigs. So there is a great level of medical research that is going on in this area, and only see the positives from it.
Okay, I think we've exhausted the questions. So can I just ask each of our panelists if there's anything that you would like to add before closing? And I'll start with you, Antria.
Nothing to add. If anyone wants to pop up any question, they can find us through LinkedIn or anything, or they can ask through the FIP. And I know there are a lot of new stuff about diabetes, so they can find a lot of information. That's all for me. Thank you.
Kalyan?
I really thank the FIP for giving me this opportunity today. It's 6 a.m. In St. Louis right now. I mean, now it's 7:30, but the lecture started at 6 a.m. It's been a very, very interesting topic, and I learned a lot from the other two speakers, and I'm looking forward to any questions that any of your guests might have. And this is the first time I've attended an FIP event as a virtually. So it's a very good learning platform, and I appreciate you guys for carrying this over. It's a big plus.
Yeah, your referral to the time highlights the global nature of our organisation. 6 a.m. for you, it's 11 p.m. for me. So on a Friday night. So, so Anna, I'll refer to you now.
I don't have anything to add. Thank you for letting me be here. It's been an honor.
Okay, well, I'd like to wrap up. Thank you for our audience who have provided the questions. There were some very interesting questions. I'd also like to thank our three speakers, three very different presentations. Clearly one focused very much on the drug therapy and the emerging sort of classes of drugs that we are seeing in diabetes. One very much focused around, as I said, some of the digital interventions and some of the technology that we can use to help manage our patients better, and one very much around the health services and the role of pharmacists in improving the management of our diabetes patients. Could I finish by referring you to the fact that FIP hosts many digital events? This is, of course, part of a 5 5-part series on diabetes. That 5-part series will culminate in the release of significant documentation around diabetes and the role of pharmacists. There are 2 more events, and I would refer you to those and urge your attendance at those events. But I'd also highlight there are sort of a significant number of other FIP digital events that you can engage with, and they can all be found. They're very easily accessed through the FIP website. Once again, thank you to our 3 speakers for your insights and your time. Thank you to our 160 or 70 participants that have participated tonight in our webinar. And thank you for FIP for making it all possible. So thank you to everybody, and good morning to you, Kalyan. Good afternoon to our European audience, and good evening to our Asian and Western Pacific audiences. Good night from me. So thank you for your attention. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.